Among America's greatest public treasures are the 191 million acres of national forests and grasslands managed by the USDA Forest Service. Wonderfully scenic and majestic, the national forests and grasslands were once valued primarily as a source of basic commodities. But in today's world of greater appreciation and concern for the environment, other values are being promoted, and better ways are being found to manage public lands for a full range of values. These values include outdoor recreation, wildlife, and the desire for open space by an increasingly urban society. If traditional uses such as livestock grazing are to remain on public lands, they will have to find harmony with America's other values and protection of the environment. For more than 100 years, cattle and sheep have grazed the vast western rangeland. In the early days, not enough thought was given to the impact on the land. That's changed considerably over recent years. Clint Rober is a rancher historian who recalls the early era in western Colorado.
When they first settled this country, they ran their cattle out in this lower part of the country. We call it the Dobies in the wintertime, and then they ran them up here in this area above, which is the National Forest now in the summertime. And the small operators, that worked real well, but there were some large outfits came in, we call them tramp stockmen, and they pretty well devastated the Dobies and some of that country, and also some of the high country.
Rober says the area was overstocked. An early head count by the U.S. Forest Service bears out the fact that stocking levels are greatly reduced on the National Forest System today. Here on the Gunnison National Forest in Colorado, a man dressed in buckskins is headed for a rendezvous with others who like to share the lore of the early West. On the range today, there's a new attitude on the part of many who must make their living here.
My personal goal is to have landscape that will sustain not only our cattle operation into the future, but also the wildlife needs and recreation needs of all the other users of the forest, too.
There are more than 9,500 allotments in the National Forest System used by ranchers like the Robers and their neighbors.
Well, there's 5 permittees that run their cattle in common. We share the work and the costs of being out here. And it takes people working together to make it work right. We've got a good bunch of people. We have people that are family-oriented and looking towards the future and care about what they're doing.
Forest Service range conservationists work closely with ranchers in managing the range. In most cases, there is good cooperation.
It's a privilege to be able to use the forest. You know, we try to use it so we can come back another year. At the same time, we try to raise as good a product as we can. You know, we're paid by weight, and so we try to handle the livestock in an easy manner, which the better we handle them, the easier it usually is on the forest.
On this district is to go on the same allotment to reduce a poison hazard. Blue larkspur is poisonous to cattle, but not to sheep. Range vegetation changes with the seasons, greening up after the snow melts in the spring, and then curing out to shades of brown by summer. Cattle thrive on grass, and grasses need to be grazed.
Grasses and forbs livestock eat. They evolved under use by grazing animals. The grazing removes some of the fine fuels that generate fire hazards. Animals coming in at the right time and utilizing the right amount will tend to knock the seed into the grass. Their hooves act as cultivators. Well, actually, some grazing, the right amount, will actually improve the health of the range ecosystem.
It isn't necessarily too many cows, but poor management of them that can cause a range to deteriorate. Stu Adams was a range conservationist here for a dozen years before his retirement.
We've improved range conditions a lot. In some cases, we've been able to combine allotments and make a more efficient management system to where we're just getting better use of the land, and we're able to rest country where it wasn't being rested before. And I think that's has really made a lot of difference in the condition of the ranges that we have.
Relaxation is what many tourists come to the National Forest to find. It's an experience the whole family will remember, with places to camp, trails to hike, and lakes to fish or admire. The hunting season attracts many sportsmen. Permittees who used to have the public range pretty much to themselves now have many more users to share it with.
Oh, there's plenty of room. There's, like you say, you're talking millions and millions of acres, and everybody has a different opportunity to utilize different places. We have no problem with it. We have a lot of tourists, a lot of friends of ours that come up here and camp out and stuff, and it's interesting to talk to you because they'll tell you, well, I've seen some of your cows and you know how good they're doing and how good they look, and it's beneficial to both of us.
While there may be plenty of room here on the Tonto National Forest in Arizona, livestock grazing is overshadowed by recreational uses and threatened by concerns for wildlife habitat and the environment. One way to achieve harmony is through better understanding and cooperation. At this local meeting, environmental groups, ranchers, and government agencies are involved in what's called integrated resource management planning. They are discussing how livestock grazing can continue in a plan to improve a section of Tonto Creek.
We all agreed as a team that the three-pasture thing was the most practical solution.
Meetings of this sort can foster understanding of divergent viewpoints and enlist support for what needs to be done. The goal is to restore lush vegetation to the riparian area, the land immediately adjacent to the creek.
The problem here is that this site is not really under the level of management that we'd like to have. And if you look around here, you can see lots of little cottonwoods and willows. See one here that are plants that are anywhere from 3 or 4 to 5 or 6 years of age, and they're only about 6 inches high. And that's a result of just annual livestock use without any real adequate rest treatment.
The recommendation is to replace season-long grazing with a rest rotation pattern, a management system which will provide critical rest from grazing during the growing season. As the riparian area is restored, it will look more like this part of Greenback Creek, with a diversity of plants and increased summer stream flow. Livestock graze the riparian area intensively, but only for a short period of time. This management system allows for the recovery of the riparian ecosystem and addresses the concerns of environmental groups.
You know, they've got an interest in this land also, and we need to really listen from them. It's their input's what's going to guide us. They voice a concern. I'd like to try to solve it if I can, you know, using grazing, which is my primary interest being a rancher.
A lot of people believe that the cattle should be completely kept out of the riparian areas year-round and just preserve them for wildlife. I think as people understand the kind of management that Eddie's trying to do in here a little better, they realize that where you have got the eroded stream banks, the kind of treatment he's giving it has brought it back to your nice gentle slopes. This is a very hard concept for many environmentalists and Sierra Club members or any of the groups concerned about the environment to swallow until they understand it.
Troy and Judy Neal took over a declining ranch 8 years ago. Like many ranchers today, they set goals that will benefit not only themselves, but the land around them.
We have a production goal, a quality of life goal, and a landscape goal. And of course our production goal is to be able to make a living on the ranch. Our quality of life is doing something that we dearly love. It's a family affair. Our family gets very much involved, and of course our landscape goal is to have the healthiest ecosystem that we can achieve through management.
One of their objectives is simply to increase plant cover as much as possible, which will increase stream flow in this desert environment.
The riparian zone in itself is an excellent indicator of the management that's also going on in the uplands, because as Troy and Judy, through their management program, stabilize the soils up there, more water will percolate into the soil, which means it will come into the riparian system not as surface runoff, but as subsurface percolation through the soil, which means the water is cleaner, it's much better quality, and as it goes through the riparian system, if there is any material in the water, such as bacteria, it's filtered out in the riparian system, and this system acts as a giant trap to trap and purify the water, which will eventually go on downstream and become the water that the people like myself will drink in Phoenix. So
This type of management is not only good for the resource up here, but it's good for everyone.
On the Mark Twain National Forest in Missouri, a few old foundations are all that remain of ill-fated attempts to farm fragile land more than 50 years ago. Initially acquired by the Soil Conservation Service, the land was eventually turned over to the Forest Service. Today, on about a third of the Cedar Creek district, warm season grasses once native to Missouri are being reintroduced. The tall grass prairie provides ideal habitat for birds and increases the biological diversity of the area.
With a variety of plants and good seeds and flowering, you always get the response of your insects. And we have a lot of the native prairies have a lot of insects on them. They make good areas for feeding, for broods, especially in the early spring, late spring, through when like a quail brood.
But the tall grass prairie can actually get too tall and dense. And that's why grazing along with fire were nature's own tools for managing the prairie.
If you went back in history when the tall grass prairies were undisturbed in this part of the country, grazing was a natural impact in that environment. The plants and animals evolved together. Large herds of bison, elk roam the prairies and they graze. Part of the grazing is the way seeds get disseminated, seeds get planted. And the prairies need some kind of a disturbance, whether it be fire or grazing or blate, something like that. That's just a natural part of its ecology.
Cattle are instrumental in bringing back the prairie grasses. By grazing down fescue, a cool season grass, they make it easier for the warm season grasses that follow to compete. There are 50 permittees who pay to graze cattle on this district. In 1990, the Forest Service collected more than $10 million in grazing fees nationally. About half the money is returned to the forest from which it comes. Yet the Forest Service is careful to balance livestock grazing with other uses of public lands.
Well, we make a concerted effort to make sure that there's a good mix on our lands, that we don't emphasize grazing over wildlife or recreation. And we've done some things to make sure that there's some harmony between those uses. Sometimes they're competing uses, but usually it's something that you can resolve.
Installing ladders over pasture fences is one of the ways the Forest Service reduced potential conflicts between stockmen and recreational users. The objective is to make a day spent on the public lands an enjoyable and memorable experience. The National Grasslands also resulted from a government program to reclaim millions of acres of marginal farmland after the Dust Bowl of the 30s. Livestock grazing and forage production were the principal activities here when the grasslands eventually became part of the National Forest System. Today on the Buffalo Gap National Grasslands of South Dakota, other resource values also receive attention.
When the Black Hills, our neighbor, started getting extremely high use, people wanted to get some solitude, they discovered the grasslands out here.
In accommodating more recreational use, including backpacking and hunting, and in satisfying other resource needs, livestock producers accepted a lot of changes. The level of grazing was cut nearly a third for the grazing district, the organization that represents the permittees. After initial concern, there were some surprising results.
What decreased is 58 head of cows, calves, 50 yearling steers we summered, and I guess that's the big loss. In 3 years we've been on it, we raised our weaning weights 50 pounds, so actually we're selling more pounds of beef than we was before.
Proper stocking rates are determined through a range analysis, which measures the type and amount of forage available. Until the introduction of planned grazing systems, cattle put pressure on a valuable resource, miles and miles of woody draws that cut through the district. Green ash, snowberry, and buffaloberry provide habitat for wildlife, but cattle prefer to hang in the draws too during midsummer.
It was a focal point of development of our management strategies, and we were able to, through large woody draw pastures and winter pastures, put every mile of woody draw under proper management.
Range improvements benefit wildlife as well as cattle. This new reservoir will be stocked with fish and serve as a habitat for waterfowl. An innovative land exchange between the Forest Service and private landowners was also made. It consolidated scattered parcels of land and brought environmentally sensitive areas under uniform management.
The land trade amounted to some 6,800 acres of land traded, and we feel that this is beneficial to the landowner, Forest Service, and the general public in the fact that it eliminated some right-of-ways crossing private land getting to the grasslands, and also the Forest Service acquiring wetlands, woody draws, and cedar breaks, which we feel is beneficial to the general public and the wildlife.
Beef production is a major part of the Great Plains economy, and the cattle that get their start here are an important component. There's a future in raising cattle on the grasslands as long as it's in harmony with other values. The success achieved here proves it can be done.
It was not the Forest Service accomplishing it. It was a cooperative effort between not only the grazing district and the Forest Service, but also the environmental groups. They've been out on tours. They've been very active in monitoring what we've been doing out here, and very involved in reviewing the range allotment management plan and the range improvements we put in to see if that is really good for the resources out there.
Idaho rancher Mike Hillman says a lot of people would give their eye teeth just to visit where he works. Hillman is right. He runs cattle on the Payette National Forest of Idaho. It almost seems like the top of the world up here. Placing salt out for the cows is a frequent chore. Son Ron and the rest of the family help with the herd. Since they bought 2 deteriorating ranches 8 years ago, the Hillmans have installed 73 miles of new fence and developed about 75 water springs to improve livestock use patterns. The steep-sided land is not easy to work. Even the cows have trouble with it.
Well, the cattle have to be raised here to be able to use this country. You get cattle from out of this country, and they just get all torn up. They'll stay right on the bottoms or hug the fences where the gates are, but when they're raised here, they know the country, they know how to work it, and as we've learned how to work it since we've been here, and the cattle don't mind it at all, and they do quite well.
The Hillmans spend a lot of time moving cattle in dozens of pastures that vary from hundreds to thousands of acres each on both deeded and permitted land. A few well-trained dogs make the job a lot easier for the cowboys. Hillman attributes his success with the ranch to a coordinated resource management plan. It's like having a management team to assist him.
Well, the benefits with the comprehensive resource management plan and the way we manage the grasses is that we have a real unique relationship with our partners, the Forest Service and the state lands and the SCS, and we, during the drought, have really never had any problems dealing with the agencies, where a lot of ranchers have had all kinds of problems, turnout times, amount of usage on the grass, and I think it comes from the standpoint that we have a real good relationship, and we're all credible with each other. We all trust each other.
The success on this one is really the cooperation between all of the agencies and the rancher involved. We don't have to, when we're doing projects, we don't have to stop at a line drawn on the map because we have the coordinated resource management plan. We can all work together to do what's best for the land. And it's great. If there's a problem in one area, we can make adjustments and maybe rest that area for a couple of years if we need to. And a lot of flexibility built in to the system. And as Mike has said, a lot of cooperation, and that's a trust level built. Generally, if he says he'd like to do something, I don't question it. I trust his judgment on what he wants to do because he gets his livelihood off of this land. And while we're charged with caring for it and maintaining it for the public, if he abuses it, he loses his livelihood. And so I I have a lot of trust in Mike and in the other agencies for helping with the management of the forest.
The Hillmans can measure their success in the riparian areas and in the uplands, where a diversity of bunch grasses and forbs are displacing less desirable species. Grass is like money in the bank to a rancher. He has to make sure the cows leave enough behind.
The idea is to use it at about a 40 to 50%. Mike has done his studies this year and showed that we've took the plant down. If you look at this plant right here, you can see some regrowth that's come on it, and it's been grazed off to about half of the plant, down to about 3 or 4 inches. And that would be about our 40 or 50% use of the grass. And if we can keep it grazed at that level, not taking it clear down into the crowns, then we can keep a healthy plant and keep the production up.
Where advisable, controlled burns were done to remove sagebrush, which had grown too thick and robbed grasses of moisture.
Since the burn, we think we've increased the grass production in here about 400%. Mike tells me he put 350 head of cattle in this last fall. I came in and personally looked at it with him after he went out. Actually, that was last summer. And after he'd gone out, we couldn't tell he'd been here.
Wildlife also benefit from proper range management. The improved condition of the range has increased numbers of wildlife and added opportunities for big game hunters to find elk and mule deer. Hunters are welcome on the Hillmans Ranch.
Most of Mike's land is situated so that you would have to cross a private land to get onto the public land. So Mike's been real good about letting people come across his privately owned land and come onto the public land, which he doesn't have to do.
Hillman's cooperative attitude fits well with the recognition of other values on the forest system. His stewardship of the land reflects the feeling of most ranchers today.
You know, you got to be responsible when you have something like this to take care of it.
Livestock grazing on the National Forests and Grasslands has a long tradition. But that's not why it should continue. It will continue because grazing can be a cost-effective, environmentally sound tool to complement other uses and values. Livestock grazing can be in harmony with the range.